All right, party people, welcome to the raw and uncut version of the SellOut Show. Today, we have something I think probably everybody needs to hear from somebody that I think everybody needs to know, right?
Yeah.
Who are we talking to today?
We're talking to Frosty, the Dan Frost. And if you have ever found yourself looking for a sales gig, been invited to leave a sales gig, and now you need to find another one, this is like the raw, uncut, real truth of what it's like to find the right fit for you, and it will come.
Yeah. So watch the whole session, watch this whole episode for insights in motivation, inspiration, and good tips too. Here we go.
Here we go. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
Good morning. Welcome to the SellOut Show, where we are always sold out. I'm Diana Guerin. I am the irreverent sales girl, and my mission is to bring a dash of dignity to the art of selling.
Hey, Diana. Hey, everyone. I'm Sean Carroll Sandy. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer of the Selling Agency, where we coach humans how to sell to other humans. Because if you're selling like someone who doesn't love their job, it's like you just show up as cold as ice. Your customers will get frostbitten.
That is a perfect lead-in. Today we have Frosty, otherwise known as the Dan Frost, as our guest. And tell him what we're going to talk about, Sean.
So Dan we went on a journey last year in choosing the right next sales job. Yeah. You know, I related that I took, that job sounded great, like a great opportunity. I didn't put as much thought and effort into the search that Dan did. So he's got some awesome tips and insights and inspiration for you if you're looking at making the leap to a new sales position soon.
Yep, that's right. So enjoy. Recording. Good morning, Dan. Frosty, I am so glad that you could join us today. Sean and I were just talking to you before we started recording, talking about how we've really been saving this topic. So I ran into, if there's ever a case made for social selling, it's Frosty, because I ran into you on social media. And there was one time when I was in a massive jam with one of my customers, and I asked you if you could get on the phone and help me out, and you totally did. I was trying to get a hold of chief marketing officers, and you got on and you gave me some pointers, so I was like, man, this guy's awesome. And then you went through a change in your job and started looking for a new gig, and you found a really great one. So I think one of the things that's really important and hard for people is to keep their mindset good while they're looking for a job, and then to really stay the course to find the right job. So I'm so excited that you could join us and sort of help people who are on that journey.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Excellent. Yeah, it's, I think that finding the right job, especially in sales, that's a job in and of itself. I'd love to know, because I think that we all can think back and look at how we ended up in the sales positions and stuff. But, what some of us were, I'm just going to say, I was much less strategic about doing it and going about it than I think what a lot of people could be. So what we want to talk about today on the show is, how did you approach looking for a job, selecting and picking the right sales job? So give our listeners some insights around that. So what did you do first when you knew that it was time to switch, or you knew that you had that search ahead of you?
Yeah, well, and it's funny that you mentioned the word strategic, because that was something that came up in conversation with a few different people. I think as I was talking with Diana, our mutual friend, Phil Gerbyshack, and a few others, it was that I was trying to not be very reactive and trying to shoehorn myself into something that might work. Mm-hmm. So I became a lot more selective, which is interesting because I would jump into things and just say, I'm going to make this work. I've got a lot of confidence. I've had some results over the years. So I think I can make anything work. I think I can work with any type of customer. That doesn't really faze me too much. So it took me becoming a father of a baby to say, I'm going to be selective about next job. And I took a lot of time really to focus on what I wanted. And I didn't just, I had a lot of conversations, but I also was upfront with people, because before I would say, I'm open to anything. Let's chat. And I would let people know and say, I don't think this is a good fit. Yes, I've got the background. Yes, I could be good at the job, but I don't know if this is what I want. oh, no, let's talk. Sure, I'll give you some time. But I became much more selective in what I moved forward with. And going back to the other part of your question, the first thing I did was, after the last gig hadn't worked out, being a startup, and looking back, I probably wasn't the right guy for what that team needed. Nothing against that team. The guys were at Forcivity. I've got a lot of respect for them. I'm still friends with them on social media, and get together with them every now and then. So Steve Baines and Ben Yaris, wish them nothing but the greatest success. But in hindsight, I wasn't the type of sales rep that they needed.
Mm-hmm.
I took a step back first to process everything, because when things don't work out, you do have to kind of check yourself a little bit and figure out what happened, right? Because otherwise you could repeat the process and be doomed to repeat history. So sometime just to kind of center myself a little bit, find my inner chi, I guess. And then I started reaching out to folks in network. I of course looked on some typical job posting boards, seeing what's out there. I don't have a lot of great things to say when it comes to looking for certain jobs on LinkedIn or Indeed or any of that stuff, but it's good to know what's out there.
Yeah, they're
well,
not.
Why do you say that? What is it that doesn't work so well about those areas?
Well, I think that there's, with Indeed, like I tried, focusing on particular things, and stuff that was coming up in my wasn't always appropriate. So part of that could have been on me. Maybe I could have used it a little bit better. I don't know, but I didn't have a lot of patience for, hey, I'm looking for inside sales. I would prefer to be remotely because we've got a little baby boy. And all of a sudden I'm getting, like telemarketing jobs that are, you can make up to, 6 figures selling credit card processing systems. It's like, no, that's not what I want.
So did you if you were giving advice about where you're finding your gigs, would you say don't use those at all, or was it just part of the activity that you needed to be doing?
I think it is something on the checklist that you do need to maybe eventually get to. I would say before you go to LinkedIn and to Indeed or wherever you might go, I would reach out to your network and reach out to your closest friends and your peers and stuff, and say, hey, here's the situation. What's going on with you? What's going on with your company? What's going on with other companies that because I knew companies that were hiring in Boston, but I knew that I wasn't going to commute to Boston every day for a job. So I would share those jobs gladly with my network as I'm looking for a job too. And I think another one of our mutual friends, Kenny Madden, I talked with him during the process, and he was going through the same thing, and he was helping other people when things weren't a fit for him. So I first reached out to the network, and then, due diligence, was checking some things out on LinkedIn first, Indeed kind of second, but the network was much more helpful.
I love that always, I think great salespeople through and through are always a conduit and always a connector. Like no matter what, always a conduit, always a connector. And the other thing that's really interesting is I've got a client that is a phenomenal recruiting and talent search firm. And they're just so above average. They're just wonderful. And what I've learned from them is that by the time a job hits, a job board, like, it's way too late. Like you as a candidate, I mean, you're way too late. They're actually probably going to process you maybe for the next job down the line. By the time, that's seen, there's inside information, like if they're working with a recruiting firm, they already know about it. They're already lining up candidates. So it's way too late. Mm-hmm. So I would, on the candidate side, it does not hurt at all to work with recruiters. If you feel like they have a good reputation, you trust them, and you can look at their track record, because that costs you nothing, and they're going to know about jobs way before they hit the job board. So that's a little inside tip.
Exactly.
How do you find them? Like, where do you find the recruiters?
Recruiters? They find you. That's their job. Oh, trust me, they find you.
Yeah, I was going to say, out of my maybe I'm up to like, let's say 2,200 or 2,300 connections on LinkedIn. I don't know what the percentage of recruiters that is, but it's a healthy percentage because I always accept invites, even when they're not personalized, which is a no-no, but I always connect with recruiters. I always connect with people. Unless they're my direct competition, I'll connect with them. And it's funny too, because over the years, you get a feel for some of the recruiters. Recruiters, by and large, like salespeople don't always have a great reputation. Recruiters don't have a great reputation.
Yeah.
And you'll find that if your experience is like mine, 85 to 90% of them aren't trying to always find the best fit for their clients. They're just trying to get people in front of their clients, and that's how they're showing their value, which is horrible. It's a horrible way to go about it. And that's why, if I do work with recruiters, it's a very select group of people that I feel has my best interest at heart, that they have their customers' best interest at heart, and they can say, you know what, I don't think this is right. A recruiter that will fire you from the hiring process is much more valuable than someone that will put you in front of 5 people.
Yeah.
So recognize that and realize that, I know you mentioned someone, there's another person in my network. I don't know if you girls are connected with Scott McGregor over at Try Something New up in the Northeast. And he's actually gotten some awards, some Stevie Awards for innovation around the recruiting and hiring process. And he takes a much different approach. And he's a guy that, I would go back to in a heartbeat. And I've tried to bring other people to him and try and figure that out. So you have to find the people that are worth your time. Don't just be willing to, you can talk with everyone, but know when it's not going to go anywhere. Like I talked with a few recruiters and they would say, oh, have you thought about, outside sales and, selling like workplace uniforms? Like, nope. No.
I know, I haven't. Thank you for asking.
But no, I haven't. Well, geez, the pay is good. There's good benefits, but a lot of those things now, they're across the board. Everyone has competitive pay. Everyone has benefits. If you're going to be really that worried about a few extra vacation days, don't get into sales, but start to figure out what you want to do. And that was, looking back on my career, I kind of hawked around to different industries, different products because I liked new challenges. But if I really thought about my career back then and setting up a path of stepping stones as opposed to jumping around to different places, it would have been much different because I would have thought, okay, I do like the IT stuff. What should I focus on? What am I passionate about? And I could then hone in on that. And that goes back to the job search and knowing what you want to do. And I think Diana and I even talked about this at one point as I was going through the job hunt, and I was like, oh man, like this local group, like they reached out to me and like I just don't get it. Like I've tried to tell them no, and she agreed. I won't say their name for sake of not putting anyone on blast, but it wasn't a good fit. So you have to know what you want to get out of the job and know that certain things are going to happen, across the board.
Well, that was one of my questions, Dan, so how did you determine, what were your top 3 criteria before you would entertain the thought of having a conversation with that company? What were the most important 3 things you were going to use in your pre-qualification process?
Well, for me, in my background, I've worked at some well-established companies. I've worked at some startups. And although job security, that's an oxymoron, right? I don't care where you are. It's an oxymoron. However, with that said, I didn't want to necessarily get into the risk reward of a startup again. I wanted to find someone that was a little more well-established, someone that was a bit of an industry expert in their field. And so young companies, I immediately took off the board. And I did want to get back into, sales overall, but I went back and forth about IT sales and then also helping salespeople because I love talking about sales, philosophy, methodology. Like Diana said, we got on the phone just to hash out some ideas about getting in touch with people and Twitter tips on O's and stuff. I love talking about that stuff. So I thought briefly about, joining the team over at Sales Hacker with Matt Schuler. But to your point, his process was pretty far along. They had a ton of candidates, and someone was back channeled to him, and but you know what? They could have been a better fit anyways. So that job didn't work out. But my connection with Max, he funneled referrals to me the following months. He would send me a spreadsheet and say, here are the companies I know that are hiring.
Wow.
Know who's hiring remote.
Always a conduit, always a connector. That's awesome.
Let me know if you need an introduction or something. And he even checked back in a few months ago. Hey, Dan, I know someone in Boston, blah, 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 blah. It's, oh, Max, I'm so sorry. Like, don't know if you saw the update, but I'm doing this now. And so we just had a little back and forth, about what's going on with him and Gaetano and the team at Sales Hacker. So, but that's going back to the network, right?
Well, I want to point something out here, Dan. So I think that's right. And in fact, that's exactly what I did when I found myself in a position that I didn't have a job anymore. But what's important is for the people that are watching this is, a network doesn't just appear out of nowhere. So, when life is going good, you should be making sure that other people's lives are going good too. Wow. And, so how did you, we don't have to do it for a long time, but that network is just so incredibly important. Can you talk a little bit about how you built a network that you could fall back on when you needed it?
Sure. And if you don't build your network to fall back on them,
Nope.
But over the years, I've been doing inside sales for 10 years. I've been a big fan of LinkedIn, a big proponent of it, and leveraging it different ways. And so a lot of times I would connect with people because I enjoyed, say, their content, or they were featured in an article, or whatever the case might be. So I would, send a personalized invite and say, hey, so-and-so really enjoyed your article about this, would love to catch up with you. And sometimes, sometimes it was, there's literally nothing I had to sell them. Nothing.
Right.
Other times, there are people who I think fit my ideal customer profile, and there's a little bit of a long game at play. But I'm also upfront with it. I don't hide anything about the fact that, hey, I want to talk with you about what I'm doing right now and how I think I can help. But I will start off with, hey, I saw your blog about 3 things in Salesforce administration. Loved how you laid it out, blah, 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 blah. Congrats on becoming a Salesforce MVP. Oh, and by the way, I'd really like to talk with you about your path in the Salesforce ecosystem and tell you a little bit about what we're doing over here at Forcivity, for example. And I do that now with IT directors and people that are experienced. I try and say, hey, I'm trying to, are these your biggest challenges? Do you want to hear how we've helped other customers address these challenges, because we are a Dell EMC Titanium partner? And I would include that hook kind of all in one.
Yeah, that's great.
What was, so we talked a little bit about like what was most important to you, what kind of sales you wanted to get into, didn't want to commute, would this be a good fit? So what were like, I would love to know, what were your deal breakers? Be like, this looks good, and then, oh, no, you're out. Like what were the deal breakers when you're looking at different opportunities?
Well, eventually deal breakers would, some of it came down to location. Because I've done commutes before, long commutes, and with the young family, I said, you know what, that's kind of like a deciding factor, right? So that was one thing. Other times I would get into conversations with people, and the job was a little more entry level, so the pay wasn't quite as competitive as they would have advertised. But the location was a big one for me, actually.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What do you think? I think this is interesting, and this is not necessarily about the search, but I'm finding, I think people have wildly different expectations about ramp up time. Can we talk about ramp up time?
Yeah, let's talk about ramping.
Ramp up time. What did you hear in the interview process from different companies? What was their expectation of the ramp up time? And what do you think is a reasonable ramp up time for a rep with your experience?
Well, it does, I hate to come out with the answer, well, it depends, but there's no hard and fast way to do it, because if you're working with, say, a niche or, one or two products, that's a lot different than working with a whole portfolio of providers. So I've heard that with IT and getting into some of the enterprise stuff, ramp up with one particular vendor can be 5 to 6 months. Mm-hmm. Whereas I've had other jobs where there's really one product to sell. You do a little bit of training, you ask some questions, and I would be on the phones by the end of the first week, beginning of the second week. You just jump into the deep end of the pool because, and I do think that there is some value to that at some point, that you need to not so worry so much about analyzing what you know. Sometimes you just have to jump in and figure out what you don't know very quickly, and be honest with your prospects too. That's the other thing, is when you get people on the phone and people ask you questions, eventually, you do want to be that subject matter expert, right? You want to be their kind of consultant, right? Consultant-based selling. You want to be providing value. Well, early on, that's really tough to do. So what you need to focus on is being just constantly curious and trying to figure out the next set of questions, and then relaying that back to customer success stories that you've heard, conversations that you've had with your engineers or your peers or your manager. You tie that all back together, and then if they say, I need to have a question about this, then you be honest. Don't lie. Just say, hey, I'm not sure. That's a really good question. Let's get you set up with a phone call or a demo if appropriate, and you kind of move it on there. But yeah, the ramp up time can range so much based on the products, and I think someone's experience too. Because when I first got into inside sales, I had worked in retail before, so the concept of someone spending tens of thousands of dollars with me, never having met me, was a mind blower. That was a big paradigm shift for me.
Right.
But, trying to figure that out. And then of course I realized, well, hey, they're not coming into the hardware store and buying a box of nails. Like, it's company's money, but it's not their money. And they need the software, they need, XYZ solution. And then the other part was getting over a fear of the phones. Early on, I was just like, I can do this. And then you actually start to get on the phones, and you get rejection, because it happens. And more people picked up the phone 10 years ago than they do now, but you have just a bunch of different things going on. You've got maybe some head trash that you need to get rid of. You need to get your mind right.
Trash.
And that was a big thing for me, was just getting over that initial fear. But then once you do it and you have some success, I didn't know how well I was doing. And then someone around me says, oh, Jay, I really like how you did that. Or you check in with your boss and you say, where am I at? Like, there's a pipeline and there's an indicator, but you say, if you ask yourself, where are you at? What could you have done better? What can you improve upon? What are the things you want to accomplish in the next 90 days or 6 months? And you're upfront with your boss about that. That's super helpful, because they'll tell you if you're, maybe a little behind the curve in certain areas. If you're doing certain things really well. You need to know your strengths. You need to know your weaknesses, and not always to convert the latter into the former. Sometimes you need to focus on your strengths.
Right.
Yeah, Dan, so Frosty, I'm going to interrupt you for a second, because you brought up, can I interrupt for a second, Sean? Did you have something?
Well, I have a follow-up, but yes.
Well, maybe you should go first, but I definitely want to touch on, you've brought up your boss and your manager a couple times, and I make the case that your manager is almost more important than the product that you sell, and maybe in some cases is more important. So we can put that on hold. We can put a pin in that. But what did you want to say, Sean?
Well, I was curious because it goes back to a theory that I have about onboarding. What was the first thing that when they said like, oh, you're hired, let's get you onboarded. Here's your email. Here's your password. Boom. What was the next thing that happened?
Well, the next thing here at Eastern Computer Exchange was figuring out the different partners and the partner portals and getting access to some of that stuff so you can start to learn about the different folks you're going to be working with. And it was very much, and we also use Box internally. So there's a lot of training documentation. Anything you need answered is really in that central kind of share. And so there was a little bit of, you can start to figure out some stuff on your own, but here's the next steps. Make sure you have access to these places. And then once you have that, start to go through some of the trainings. And then as you go through the trainings, ask questions, talk with your technical counterparts, your sales counterparts, and it was more focused on the training, and that was the big next step before you'd start thinking about like, all right, here's how I'm going to attack my territory. Because early on we we didn't have a specific territory, so it wasn't like I could in the first week really worry about like, oh, here's going to be my customer base and here's the territory that I'm going to be focusing on. It was just around the training, the internal processes, and figuring that stuff out. So you figure out how to walk really before you can run.
Was any of the training about your customers' journey?
For this job, it was because with Dell EMC, at least, it's very much focused on the customer. And with Dell EMC, they offer a lot of different products. They're number one across the board when it comes to so much with servers and storage and everything and hyper-converged. But it's really about the customer's journey and, where are they on the path to IT transformation, and how do you enable that, and what are the problems that they're facing.
That's beautiful.
So they're thinking about things a little bit differently. So then instead of saying, well, hey, this is Dan with Eastern and we're Dell EMC, I could focus more on the conversation to say, hey, are you still bothered by legacy applications or obsolete equipment?
Awesome.
That is, you pass. No. So
well, Eastern, they pass. That's awesome.
What I've seen is so much onboarding for salespeople is broken in that, you roll up and, as soon as you get through those first, few checkpoints, it's all right, let's train you on our product. Now here's the features, here's how it works. And there's so much focus on the product and the process that you turn out salespeople and the first thing they focus on talking with their customers is the product and process. Yes. I think I would slap hands if you don't start training on your customer's process, their needs, their problems, and then fold in the features and why it's a benefit. Like, it's just, I think a lot of onboarding is backwards, and that's, let me just, why don't you just immerse yourself in everything about our product and our company and the features, and then, learn the customers as you go. It's so backwards. And so we don't write a sales playbook without attaching the two together. Like, we don't talk about any feature or any product without assessing it through the customer's lens, through their process, through their journey. So good on you.
Good on you. Well, let's talk about how you found your boss. So how do you interview for bosses and find the right one?
Yeah, and to your point, to the earlier point that the manager can be just as, if not more important than the product, that was taken into consideration. I never really considered it before during the interview process. I get along with everyone, so I'm not going to have a problem with 98% of the people out there. I'll get along with just about anyone, or at least think I can. But it became a bigger part during the process as I talked with people, and if they had, just like me, if I do my homework on a company and the people, and they haven't done their homework on me, then that tells me something, right?
Right.
Like, whereas like my conversation with my boss, Nick, and this all happened because of my network. Very good friend of mine was talking with my now VP of inside sales, heard about the problem he was having and what he was trying to accomplish, and says, I think I know a guy. He broke the conversation, and that all happened late last year. But then when I get on the phone with Nick, I really try and get a sense of who he is. I had checked him out on LinkedIn. We had a few mutual connections that I reached out to see, do they actually know him? What do they know of him? It turned out to be, some people were connected with him but didn't really know him. But then I looked at his Twitter stuff, and then during our phone call, I even remarked to him about the discrepancy between the company's LinkedIn followers versus Twitter followers. It's like, why is that? And he was like, oh, wow, that's a really good question. And then, to his credit, later in the conversation, he says, hey, how did you get so many followers? Like, I don't have that many. Like, are you like
are you on the right, Dan Frost?
Yeah. Are you looking at a different Frosty? No. but I think I know my place in regards to a lot of the other folks that I follow and like on social media. I think I met you two through our friend Jack Kosakowski. That guy's got 20,000, 25,000 followers or something crazy. I mean, he works at it. He deserves everything he gets. But
he does.
Like, so for me to have, say, 5,000 followers, I'm like, that's not that many, But to someone that has a few hundred, that's a lot. So, but anyways, he weaved that into the conversation so effortlessly. I don't know if he looked it up before or if he looked it up during our conversation. I don't care. It got that he could think on his feet. And plus, I mean, we hit it off anyways. We had some stuff in common. He had some pictures of golf. So we talked a lot about golf, and some of the stuff he was saying about golf, it really kind of relates to business sometimes, and temperament and just different things like that. And so I had a really good feeling with him, and then interviewed with the sales operations manager. Again, got a really good feeling, and, talked with Nick again. I went down to headquarters in Connecticut, drove down the 3.5 hours to meet with the CEO and co-founder.
Very good.
Just to put a face the resume, because also because I had taken on different challenges and bounced around, my resume was not that great, and that's another thing too, where if you're searching for a job and there's been, stuff happens in life, right? And everyone has their own cross to bear. So, no one likes a pity party. But if you looked at my resume on paper, it looked like shit. It just flat out looked like a hot mess. And so you have to be able to talk through that. You have to let people know certain things. So in addition to knowing some of your numbers and some of your past successes, you need to be able to tell your story and sell it, because it's vital. Because a lot of people will just brush stuff off, or if you find yourself pointing to similar circumstances where you could say, if you look back to say 3 jobs over the last 6 years, and you say, oh, those 3 jobs, they weren't great fits. Like, well, they might not have been, but to a hiring company, it's just like, well, wait a second. That company's been around for a while. This person didn't work out. Like, were they just not a good fit? So you have to know your story and be honest about it too. I was very honest about why I had left certain opportunities after 7 or 8 months, right? It was kind of a little bit of career suicide. I didn't realize it at the time. Because, you don't know that situation's going to play out when you go join a team. But you don't plan for that. But you have to know why and explain why certain things happened, and being upfront with that too. I think I owned that during the interview process.
Yeah.
You know, when I talked with my buddy Scott McGregor, or when I met Brendan down in Connecticut, or when I talked with different people, I'd say, I know my resume does not look good. I know it doesn't. It doesn't really speak to, you know, all of the great things I've done. You can put in some of your accomplishments, but people would see a stop here, a stop there. So you have to know your story. You have to know your background, but also, you know, be prepared to ask the interviewer a lot of questions. You know, when they say any questions for me, you know, even if you don't have a lot of questions, then just go Sandler style on them and say, hey, you know, I think I'm a good fit for this job. What do you think?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, one of the tips from the recruiters.
Yeah.
One of the tips from the recruiters was make a list of 10 questions, have no less than 10, because they're going to answer 8 of them. You need to have a lot of questions. That way you at least have some really great questions to ask, because, you know, the obvious ones they're going to answer. So that's a good tip too.
Yeah. One of the things that I really liked when I was looking for work, when I was looking for a job, was to ask the person that was interviewing me, do your sales reps win? Do people win around you? And there was one guy, and he was like, I don't understand he didn't understand the question. And I was like, this interview is now over. I mean, of course we got, we did the niceties and we finished it. But, and about 3 months later, I was talking to somebody who's really familiar with that organization. And I was telling them that I was interviewing with them, and they're like, wow, you dodged a bullet on that one, because this guy burns through reps. And you'd be gone now, and more discouraged and more frustrated. So, don't be afraid to ask those questions about, do people win around you? That's a VP of sales' job, is to have their sales reps win.
Yeah, exactly. And if you check out something, say like Glassdoor or something where employees can leave reviews, and something is really alarming, reach out to that person on LinkedIn. Out to someone and say, hey, I noticed that, I don't know if the names are always attached with Glassdoor, but if someone attaches their name to something, figure out, because sometimes they're just chewing on sour grapes and it's not that valid, right? Other times it is.
Yeah. So it's more indicative. I have a thing about Glassdoor. People leave reviews because they're pissed about expectations not being met. And if you read through them and start to see the theme, you can sort of get an idea of what the underlying culture is there. You can have people who are sour grapes about how they were treated, or what they were paid, or what they weren't, what they were promised. Like you can have a couple off comments and stuff, but if you start seeing the theme, then that is their underlying culture. I mean, and we get mad when our expectations aren't met and we're disappointed. So I think that's a good use of Glassdoor for you.
So I have a question. I know we're probably about time up, but how do you keep your head straight during a job search? It is terrifying.
I didn't. There were times when I didn't. You have to be willing to embrace whatever a feeling might be. Mm-hmm. Like, I did not move forward in the interview process with Max at Sales Hacker. I was heartbroken. I didn't want to talk to anyone for the rest of the day. And it was and looking back at it, I'm like, oh wow, I didn't really I don't know if I handled that the best, but whatever it was, I just took some time to process it. But overall, you have to know yourself during this process, and not just what you want to get out of it, what you're looking for career moves, but knowing what gets you excited, knowing what gets you up for things. Some people can listen to music. Some people can chug a Red Bull. Some people can do whatever. Some people can relax and meditate, whatever the case might be. Prepare for these interviews however you need to, because it can get kind of monotonous and it feels like you're telling the same story over and over again. And when that happens, it can be a little bit frustrating, because you're doing it over and over again, and the results haven't been there the first few times. So what's going to be different this time?
Yeah.
It's a really tough mindset to fight, because, you know, there's so many different factors. And like we mentioned, like the head trash, you know, that stuff can take course. And then if you don't have a good interview, that's, you know, that's not good. It's a waste of your time and a waste of the company's time. And, you know how valuable your time is, because you're going to spend, you know, an hour researching a company, or 2 hours, whatever the case might be. You're going to invest time into researching the company, the people that you're talking with, and you're going to be fully prepared. And then, you know, you get up there and you don't get any bats on balls and you strike out swinging, then, you know, you've got only yourself to blame. So, but you just have to try and keep an even keeled mindset, which I've always had over the years. I try not to let the highs or the lows affect me too much. That's not to say that, you know, I'm a robot and I don't have any feelings, but, you know, I've had some really good wins in my sales career. I've had some extremely frustrating personal moments in my life, but we all have them. It's how you respond. It's not what happens to you. It's how you respond to it. So if you want to have a chip on your shoulder because, you know, the last 2 companies don't know what they were doing and show why you're the best fit for this job next time out, you apply that mindset. But you just have to try and stay up and stay positive as much as possible. And if you can't do that, know people in your network, like who to reach out to, and be honest with them. Because, yeah, you know, most people will say, "Oh, how's it going?" "Oh, good." "And you?" "Oh, going on." That's the end of it. But have someone, whether it's a spouse or a best friend, or maybe they're one and the same. You know, it doesn't really matter. Have someone that you can go to and be like, you know, vent if you need to. You know, don't keep stuff bottled up. And if things don't work out, try and figure out why you didn't get. If you really wanted a job and it doesn't work out, ask why. This happened a few years back. I was going for a job and they were only going to hire one person. It was down to me and another guy, and the other guy had a lot more experience, and I got into the process a little bit late. And, you know, so they made their decision, and I said, well, wait a second, why? Like, I thought the interviews went really well. Like, what happened? So just keep asking some of those questions, because that will factor into the next round of conversations. You'll know where some of the weaknesses were. They'll say, "Hey, you know what? Yeah, your resume looks good, but on interview, like, you didn't seem that interested." You know, if someone says that, then you know you have to work on your body language. If someone comes back and says, "Oh, you know what? You don't have a ton of experience in this particular field." If you're really looking to get into that field, you know, do the homework. Start searching different stuff online. I mean, it's insane, right? 90% of the world's data was created in the last 2 years.
Yes.
There's a ton of information out there. If you really want something, you go after it. And maybe even, you know, if you don't have one, find a mentor, you know, different people you can attach to and bounce different things off of, different ideas, frustrations, and you find sounding boards. But you get through the process, because it's a village out there. You might feel like you're on an island sometimes, but it's really a village of people, and you surround yourself with the network. You go to people when it's appropriate. You've built up that social credit. You know, you can't go back to everyone every single time something happens, but you have certain people that you should know or be comfortable with going to. And that was super helpful, because the process was a little bit lengthy, and I wasn't going to jump at anything, but, you know, after a few months, you start to question things, like even like little bits of self-doubt, right? I've got, you know, confidence to the point of cockiness sometimes, but that didn't mean that there weren't some times where I'd be like, what is going on? Like, I would apply to something online. I didn't even get to the second interview.
Yeah.
We moved on with different candidates. So I couldn't even ask what happened. I'd say, all right, I got discounted because of what my resume is. All right, let's take a look at the resume, make sure that it tells a good story as much as possible. And, maybe next time figure out a better attack on the cover letter or on a note to someone. If I reach out to people on LinkedIn to make sure that they got a certain thing and then they never respond, then I can say, all right, well, the person's not socially savvy, and maybe that tells me something a little bit about the company. And, so I would just, keep note of certain things, but you keep plugging away and you have to look for whatever resources they are, because my resources, like, obviously we don't all share the same friends, but if I listen to, some rap music, or if I, crush an energy drink before an interview, that might not work for everyone. So you have to do a little bit of self-examination and know what works for you. That's a really, I think, big part of it.
Good.
Well, we are just so happy that you landed at a good place. I mean, the story has a happy ending when you stick through it. So I'm so glad that you were here to share your wisdom with people who, may be about to embark on this process, or have embarked, or have been invited to embark on the process.
Invited to move on.
Some of us have been. Anyway, so Sean, do you have a back of the envelope question for Frosty?
I do. Okay. So, because we were connected on Facebook, I know that you are quite a sports fan. Is that a fair assumption?
Yes.
That is, yes, it is.
So here's my question. So we gave you the superpowers to be a super athlete. You could only play one sport and for one team. What would it be and who would they be? Basketball,
Boston Celtics.
Really? Okay. That did not take
no.
A lot of time.
No, so real quick, I was raised on Celtics basketball of the 80s.
Larry Bird.
Exactly.
Short shorts.
I literally have a pair of Larry Bird socks. I have.
Wow.
Not wearing them today. I should be, because they're kind of like my lucky socks. Whenever I wear them, it's just like good things happen, whether I'm actually playing basketball or, I'm going to a meeting or something, or sometimes it's just a joke where someone says, oh, you pumped up for the day, and I just show them my Larry Bird socks. Like, yeah, taking this pretty seriously. But I know my dad was a big fan of the Celtics, and so, even as a baby, I don't remember this stuff, but I hear stories and see pictures of me propped up on the couch next to him, watching basketball. I do remember as a kid, like, there was one night the Celtics were playing on the West Coast and they were losing, but they made a great comeback. My dad came upstairs, literally woke me up and was like, you have to watch this. You have to come watch this basketball game right now. And so I think there's, it's a lot of the fond memories around it. So basketball was my first sport that I really loved. And even growing up when I was playing other sports, I saw it as keeping myself in shape for basketball. I absolutely loved it. I still get out there and attempt to play a couple of times a week. It's a lot more difficult now that the body can't keep up with the mind. I'm a really good player in my mind.
I know that feeling.
Then I get out there and the results don't always indicate that. But yeah, basketball is the first love, and being here in New England, the Celtics are very easy to root for. But if I didn't go basketball, I'd say something that's come up the last few years is golf. I would love to have the skills of some of these professional golfers.
Mm-hmm.
They are just amazing. And granted, I might be the occasional weekend warrior, not so much with the baby, but I'll get out there and play a few times a year or something. And I just really like the game. And it's you're out there as much against the person that's out there with you, but you're really going against yourself.
Yeah.
Can you play better than last time? Can you figure out the situation? Is the right play to go for it? Is the right play to lay up and then make a easier approach shot? And I think a lot of those lessons do apply to business and life as well. So basketball first, golf second.
Golf. All right. Well, I knew you'd have a great sports answer for us, and you have a great team. So excellent. Well, thank you, Dan. I hope that people take away the practical and the useful tips from what you're talking about, but also the spiritual journey of looking for a new job, the right fit, and what's their next home. It's like you're looking for a home, right? So thank you so much for sharing that with us today.
Yeah, my pleasure. And if anyone, viewing this, I'm always open to talking or pointing people in certain directions. So if people want to find me on LinkedIn or on Twitter or whatever, I'm always glad to talk with people and like you said, be a conduit, be a connector whenever possible. And really enjoyed the time on the show. Next time we'll talk about some sales stuff, and we'll get to the actual battle.
Thank you so much, Frosty. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Thanks, Diana. Thanks, Sean, too.
All right. Woo! I mean,
wow.
If I ever had to go get a new sales job or wanted to get a new sales job, I would so apply so much of what Dan talked about here. Great insights.
Yeah, network. The other thing I really liked that he kept bringing up was extreme ownership. Mm-hmm. He owned his results the whole way through, even when it was, and I just love how he told us the truth like he did.
Yeah, that it's not, selling and targeting a new position, they're kind of the one and the same. And you've got to be great at sales to get a great sales gig. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, we would love for you to engage with this episode. Leave us comments about something extraordinary you've done in your sales gig search, or how you determine what's important to you, or or even a question. Dan, he said he's real open. He would love to help people on that journey. So leave that in the comments below. And if you didn't subscribe already, do subscribe.
What are you waiting for?
No.
Subscribe. All right, so I'm going to kick us out, and I'll say, stop hoping.
And start selling.
That's right. Bye.